This video demonstrates creating a report that uses real-time data. The report will use signals in the process to track batch, machine, alarm, or other types of cycles in the process. The report will log data continuously during cycles and place the data for each run through the cycle onto its own worksheet. Okay, to get started configuring our cycle report, let's open up the Template Studio from Project Explorer. Inside of Excel, create a new template by opening up the XLReporter ribbon and opening Template, New. Just give the template a name and choose to start with a blank report template. Inside the template, the first thing to do is define the layout of the worksheet. I'll do that by adding a header using XLReporter's Content Designer. So I'll just run my target over the area I want the header to display, and then give it a title. And you can see that when I insert this into the template, it's blue because I'm using a blue design theme. The next thing I want to do is add the data connection for the report. So I'll go to Connect, select my real-time data connector, and then I'll browse into the name parameter to create a new data group. Inside of the data group, I'll add tags by browsing into the name field and just selecting them from a live list inside of the connector. Now that I've added my 8 tags, I can save the group, close it down, and I'll add it into the template on B6, so a couple rows below my report header. And I'll use the type insert at end. And what that's going to do is start inserting data on row 6 and place each subsequent update to the report below the last. So I'll add that, save and close connections, and you can see that the header row created by the data group is also theme formatted. Let me just widen my columns out so I can see my tag names. I'll widen the date time column as well. The next thing I'll do is establish a naming convention for the report. And for this one, what we really want to see is each machine cycle get its own worksheet in the report. To do that, I'll name the template worksheet after my report name register variable that we created in the previous exercise. And then I'll name the workbook after the year, month, and day. For my process, I'm going to do several cycles a day, and they'll be short cycles, so I can collect them into a new file every day. But of course, you can customize this setting to fit the nature of your particular process. As I update this report, though, day in and day out, I'm going to end up with dozens and then eventually hundreds of report files in the same directory. So I'll add a little bit more structure to that output by setting my folder name for the report to the year. And then I'll create another subfolder using a backslash, and I'll use the month name. So I'll only end up with a month worth of these daily files in any one folder at a time. The final piece of this is scheduling the report to update automatically in the background. So I'll go into the schedule, and this report will be updated by 2 different actions. The first one keeps track of the current cycle name, so we know what to name the worksheet for each cycle. So for that, we'll use an action of set value to a variable, and the variable we want is the one we just used to name the worksheet. And the value is going to be the process tag that tells us what the name of the cycle is. So if I browse in there, minimize calendar, and go into my connector items, I can select my cycle ID tag. So now I know that I'm going to be setting that tag into this variable, but I have to describe when I'm going to do that. And when I want to do that, it's going to be an event-based condition, and really it's going to be whenever this cycle ID changes, I want to know that and set it in this variable. So I'll do that by setting my tag parameter in the condition to the same process tag, the cycle ID. And because my cycle ID is a text string, I'll use a text condition, which are all these ones that are in all capitals here, and I'll use the text on change condition. Now, the second action is going to be actually updating the report. So for that, we'll use update a worksheet on the template sheet of the report. And the condition for this one is going to be throughout the duration of the cycle. And we can establish that by setting to a tag that describes when the cycle starts. So for me, that's just my cycle start tag. And the condition is going to be when it equals 1. That's how we know a cycle starts. Now what I want to do is update the report continuously throughout that cycle. So I'll do that by setting a recur behavior. And I'll start the recurrence on the event time, so when we read this transition. And I'll do it every 5 seconds. Because again, for me, my cycles are going to be short, so I want some pretty high resolution data over that time frame. But you could keep track of data at a less frequent rate by just increasing this time here. So now that we have the 2 schedule commands that will operate this report, we can test it out by simply starting the scheduler. And then I'll return to the Product Explorer and open up the System Check tool, which will let us actually write out to the values that we're using to name and update the report. So here, I'll browse in and select those on the Connector tab. So we'll get cycle start and cycle ID. And of course, when this report's actually in production, the PLC program will be changing these values. We won't be doing it manually, but we're doing this to test the design of the report. So first, I'll start an update so we can see the current values of the tag. So we know we're not in a cycle right now, and the last one we ran was cycle 0. So let's establish a new cycle name and a new worksheet name just by going to the next cycle here. So I'll go to cycle 1. And you can see that we picked up on that name change, and we've now set this tag value into this variable. So now we're ready to start a cycle. So I'll do that by transitioning my cycle start to 1. And you can see that we picked that up, and we'll pick up a new value every 5 seconds as long as we hold that value of 1. So you can see there we got a second timestamp. And there's a third one. So now let's stop the report by transitioning back to a 0. And then we can check out the output for this just by going into the Product Explorer, opening up the Workbook Reports viewer. And you can see here that I have my RT cycle folder, my annual folder, my monthly folder inside that. Inside of the current month folder, I've got my March 9th workbook. Inside of the workbook, I've got my cycle 001 worksheet. And inside the worksheet, I've got the continuous updates that ran during our test. So it's pretty safe to say we've done our design work correctly for this one. And now we can simply walk away and let XLReporter work together with the PLC to generate these reports automatically in the background. For more information, visit us online at www.scitech.com.